So the first one I want to talk about is kind of an opportunity that came. The idea started early on when Marvel and Disney started talking to each other, was to bring the Disney parks into comic books. And they were able to develop the Disney Kingdom series. And I'm going to kind of run through some of the titles that they did and some of the attractions that were made into comic books. And then maybe we'll talk about a little bit about like the people who made them come together and some of those things. So the first one they did, which is kind of weird, is the Seekers of the Weird. And it's based on the Museum of the Weird, which is an unbuilt attraction. It's a walkthrough that was kind of an idea that they were working through. Imagine Rolly Crump had this idea, had a lot of ideas to put into this. Eventually, the Museum of the Weird becomes the Haunted Mansion. But the Seekers of the Weird is kind of like an adventurous group who are looking for weird things to like bring back to the museum, and this is the first one, which is it was kind of like it didn't scream Disney parks. But then we get into some big ones that I'll kind of run through real quick here. We've got Figment, which is so popular that it gets a second run in the kind of short. They kind of had like a 5 or so issue run for each of these, but Figment does get a second one. Big Thunder Mountain gets one for Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. The Haunted Mansion gets its own, even though Seekers of the Weird happen. And Enchanted Tiki Room gets its own. So a lot of these are those big classic attractions. A lot of them go back very many years. We got the Epcot connection, Disneyland, Magic Kingdom stuff. It's all kind of coming together there. And it's kind of an interesting take, because this is only a few years after Disney takes over Marvel, and they put these out. The Figment ones were fairly popular, but I'm not too sure that a lot of the other ones were that popular, other than to big Disney parks fans.
Sure,
yeah.
and I think something that we saw pop up in the Disney gift shops on the parks property is you can go, particularly in areas like Star Wars Launch Bay, and I'm sure in the gift shops of a lot of these rides, they have either the single issues or the trades of these Marvel books, and I think it's a really interesting idea. A lot of those names that pop up, people like Jim Zub on the Figment book, Dennis Hopeless on Big Thunder Mountain, Josh Williamson, those are prominent writers. Particularly Jim Zub is someone who has done Dungeons and Dragons,
Nice.
A property where, hey, you are the Dungeons and Dragons guy. I know he's done some Rick and Morty Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, nice.
But Josh Williamson on Haunted Mansion, he, since 2016 when that book came out, he's like one of the top guys at DC. He was writing The Flash for a really long time after their 2016 reboot of their universe. And now he's writing, I think, their big crossover, which is called Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Oh, okay.
So he's someone who, I think all of those guys would have been, not big creative
At the time.
names, but, they're the trusted bullpen of writers and creators. And all of those books, I've read a couple. I think I've taken a breeze through the Big Thunder Mountain, and I believe, the first few issues of the Figment. It is this really synergistic idea of, hey, I don't think we're ever going to get a Figment show or a Figment movie a la Pirates of the Caribbean, but there is a mythology here that we can play on. Definitely Seekers of the Weird is a deep cut, but sometimes it is low investment to explore an idea and to kind of expand on these ideas. So you're expanding on the mythology of these rides in the same way that the Gore Verbinski Pirates movie does, and you're letting people who, as you and I both know, there are these deep fandoms for these rides, and there is plenty of history and, like I said, mythology built into these rides, and so I think this is a really interesting way of using Marvel Comics as an entity to flesh out some of the stories in a pretty low-cost way. Again, much more cost productive than a cartoon or a movie that might be hundreds of millions of dollars to produce. Like the, and some of those haven't been successful. The Haunted Mansion with Eddie Murphy. I think, has there been one, Mission to Mars, but I think Mission to Mars, there's a little bit of, a little hazy on how much of that is an adaptation and how much of it isn't. So,
no, yeah.
But, an interesting idea and an early and quick and cheap way to use this new entertainment company they bought.
No, and so it ran from 2014 to 2017 kind of through these. I had read that they did have bigger plans to kind of keep going with this. They haven't put anything out since 2017, but one of the thoughts was that they would kind of make like a Disney Kingdoms universe where all of these were kind of happening in the same world to kind of tie them together, which I kind of wish I could have seen that come to fruition, because I think that would be cool. I'm going to kind of put you on the spot. Well, you got something there? Yeah.
Well, so the additional kind of thing, and this ties into not necessarily the Marvel, but I believe 2015, two creators, Jason Aaron, who's one of the bigger writers at Marvel now, and John Cassaday, who is kind of one of their superstar artists, they relaunch Star Wars #1. Now, Star Wars as a comics property had been at Dark Horse Comics, and I believe maybe the license lapsed because I think it might be part of it might be going back to Dark Horse. I don't know. Well, I might be wrong there, but in, I believe, 2014, 2015, it goes from Dark Horse to Marvel. And so Marvel Comics is owned by Disney, Lucasfilm and Star Wars is owned by Disney, so they say, hey, we're doing the main Star Wars book. It takes place in between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, and then they've exploded. They've had, Darth Vader comics, characters like Dr. Aphra, who I think is, just going to show up, I think, pretty soon somewhere, is introduced through the Marvel Comics. Black Chrysanthemum, who showed up on Book of Boba Fett, gets introduced in some of those books, and they've jumped around to different time periods, but the main Star Wars book is usually, it started off as in between New Hope and Empire, and then I think at some point they relaunch with a new #1, and this one is in between Empire and Return of the Jedi. So, they're bringing all these things together,
sure.
And, I think that's not necessarily a big Disney push, but I think, money talks, and if Disney had the money with Marvel to be like, hey, we're buying that license because it's up, again, I think that's just where they are making the good and quick connections and using the capital they have to bring it into some nice synergy.
I will say, too, when you brought that up, it reminded me, so I had my Disney Kingdoms books out here, but I forgot that I have a Marvel Star Wars Galaxy's Edge graphic novel also, which kind of brings that stuff, all like what you talked about, bringing that Star Wars world back in with Marvel and Disney, and that even brings it then back to the parks. So it's happening. It's not happening maybe with the Disney Kingdom series, but it's happening in some other ways, that they're still kind of leveraging all of those properties together, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
If you like this video, like and subscribe. If you really like this video, visit synergylovescompany.com for the full audio podcast.